Have you ever struggled with a behavior that just doesn't want to change? You want to change something, you know it's good for you, you know you need to make the change, but the change doesn't want to happen. Maybe even you get some training about it and you get your skills going, but still the behavior doesn't shift. Or maybe you've struggled with one of your team members where you've really wanted a behavior to shift, but that behavior has felt stuck. And you've sent them on training and you've teamed them up with somebody who can help them, but somehow the behavior doesn't change. You see, very often we end up with a mindset, if I can only try harder, if I can just try harder, and then we fail and we feel bad. And then we think, well, let me try harder. Maybe it's a diet. Maybe it's an exercise program. Maybe it's a habit at work. Maybe it's a particular vulnerability where you're unable to set boundaries. Very, very often we are stuck because our mindsets hold us back. We have a limiting belief maybe in our hearts or a limiting mindset, and that's what holds us back. So what we're going to talk about today is, what do we do about that? How do we shift that? So welcome to this Morpheus Intelligence Update. And in this update, we're going to be dealing with a particular subject which is called the Morpheus Method. So what is this Morpheus Method? Well, we're busy going through my new book, Lead Like Morpheus, The Genius of Conscious Leadership. And last month, we dealt with part 1 of the book, which was called Awaken, that we went through a process of call and build and release. And some of you who were focused in on that might remember that the build said real change doesn't happen without the mindset changing. And we had a hand model that says the mindset is the crucial thing to all the changes. So what we're going to do this month is we are moving on to be talking about the Morpheus Method. So what is the Morpheus Method? Well, it's part 2 of the book, and it has, again, got 3 pieces to it. But fundamentally, what is the Morpheus Method? It is a method for shifting mindsets, for shifting limiting beliefs. It's a method for changing behavior in ourselves and in others. So let's delve into that. Let's spend some time going in piece by piece, section by section. What can we do to shift mindsets in ourselves and to shift mindsets in our people? So the first piece of this is connect. And in connect, we are connecting with ourselves and connecting with our people. This means we need to use our eyes, we need to use our ears, we need to use our senses to be aware. So let's start with connecting with self, and then I'm going to expand it out into an incredible skill, an incredible leadership skill of how we do this with others. Connecting with ourselves is listening to ourselves. It's knowing where there are discrepancies between what our head is thinking, what our heart is believing, what our gut is feeling and telling us, what our body is sensing emotionally and physically, because our emotions live in our bodies, and where is it in our bodies? And even right to our hips, which is the action center. Where do we want to go with this thing that we're sensing? And so connection, as we talk about it in the book, is about connecting with all of who we are. Because if we just focus in here, you know what? Willpower is a limited resource. This is why change never happens if all we're focusing in on is our heads. You see, we store trauma in our bodies. We have gut feelings that can help us. We have beliefs we've taken on board in our hearts, which might be lies. We may have agreements with lies in our hearts, and that holds us back. And these things come to us from the way that we were raised, maybe parents or siblings or other adult figures or teachers or coaches and all these kinds of people that have influenced us to believe certain things about ourselves. And those beliefs hold us back. So connection starts with connecting with all of who we are. Now, this takes courage. In fact, I very often find leaders who simply do not have the courage to look deeply in the mirror. But if we want permanent change, change where the autopilot has shifted, it's no longer an autopilot going this way, it's an autopilot going this way, meaning that even if we deviate, it's going to go back to this new path that we want to be on. And that requires connecting with self first and foremost. That's exciting. Now, what else can we do here? What else can we look at in terms of this connecting and this connecting with others? So how do we take this and apply it to our people? And this requires the skill of listening. Yes, leaders need to listen. If you want to be able to have influence, if you want to have substance of influence, you need to learn to listen. We often make the incredible mistake that we think leadership is about telling. And of course, there's some of leadership is about telling, especially when it's somebody new who doesn't understand the goal or the task or what's required or what the values are or anything like that. And so for the telling, it has a role. But you know what? Listening has so many advantages. For one, it increases ownership. And so as we apply the skill of listening, as we get good at listening to our people, which by the way builds on listening to ourselves, when we are good at listening to our people, we actually increase a sense of ownership. Let me give you a specific example. When we say to somebody, you didn't do this and you need to do that, versus we say, what got in the way of you doing this? And what are your plans to overcome it? Can you see there's a different psychological ownership there? And this is why this connection with our people starts with listening, with seeing, with observing what's going on. And that way, we have incredible influence in getting them self-motivated, self-started. We ask the difficult questions and we listen. But it starts with listening, and listening is where we connect. That is a key leadership skill. How do the two link, listening to self or connecting with self and connecting with others? Well, when we are fully attuned to all of who we are, it increases the way we listen to others. We're no longer just listening to words. We're listening to emotions. We're listening to wounding. We're listening to various things that we can start to ask questions. Now, I'm not saying leaders should be psychiatrists or psychologists. I'm simply saying that we need to see people as human beings, not just brains on sticks, not just listen to the words, but listen at a deeper level. That way we have such connection with our people that they are open to us influencing them. So Connect is the name of chapter 4. And chapter 4 is the first chapter in part 2 of the book. And it deals with, if we want to do mindset change, we first need to connect. Connect with ourselves, connect with others, because without hearing what's really going on, we have no chance of making mindset changes. Chapter 5, and the second chapter in part 2 of the book, the second chapter around the Morpheus Method. The second part of the Morpheus Method is stimulate. Stimulate. What does that mean? What on earth is stimulate? I mean, Ian, are you sure you want to use that word? Well, let's talk about what it is. So once we have that connection, we've now built the connection, we now want to stimulate different perspectives. So very often the reason that we are stuck in a mindset is we haven't been able to see it from another perspective. So let me give you a very specific and simple example. I was working with a leader. This leader is a very, very social person, extreme on the extrovert scale, needs contact with people pretty much on a daily basis. And many of you introvert leaders wouldn't relate to this, but you'll understand the message of what I'm talking about, because I'm sure there's an introvert version of this. And what happened is we were talking about setting plans for the year, and there were 3 specific areas that we're targeting, and one of them was in fact about being more social, another one was about being more fit, and there was another one that related to influence. But this first one about being social, we talked it through and we got it right. And then we got to the one around being fit. And it was really interesting because the plan that this leader came up with, she had this idea that involved these various programs that she was going to run. And I said to her, okay, but I feel there's something to discuss here. She said, no, this is simple. She knows the program. She knows what to do. She will just go and do it. And I went, yeah, but there's something bothering me. And she said, what do you mean? That's simple. Here we go. We've got the plan. I said, we've just spoken about your need to be social, and you've just debriefed me on a plan where your entire exercise routine that you're going to follow on a daily basis of multiple different things is done in isolation. It's not done socially. What would it take to design for you an exercise program which is done with others? For example, going hiking, joining a hiking club. For example, joining something else where it is a group activity, where there are social elements, conversational elements, connection elements. And she went, she hadn't even realized. She's so conditioned that exercise fits in this particular box and nothing outside of that is possible. But the reality is that if she stuck with that, it would have been unsustainable. So the idea is to stimulate by asking questions that shift perspective. Where she went, oh, she wants to grow being social and having more social activities, especially on weekends. Why not make those a hiking club or some other activity where she combines the social and the exercise? And I've seen this over and over again where people have set out on very specific exercise programs that have been a total mismatch to their wiring, a total mismatch to their personality. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all exercise program. We need to attune it. And so this is an idea of we want to stimulate by challenging our thought patterns, challenging the beliefs and the mindsets that we've got that there is only one way to do something, when the reality is there are so many different ways that we can do it. And for some people, something more social is going to work better than something less social. For some people, something more intellectual is going to work better than something less intellectual. For some people, listening to podcasts on a treadmill is heaven on earth. And for other people, having a conversation while hiking is heaven on earth. We need to look at things from a different perspective. How does this apply to the way we lead others? Well, we need to be asking people very challenging questions. Now, this requires us getting over ourselves because we need to be thinking about our people. This is why this follows connection. Without connecting with who somebody really is, what is their wiring? What are their talents? What is their strengths finder, their standout, their Enneagram, whatever it might be? How do we connect with that? What's their love language? Because when we can connect with that, then we know what questions to ask. Because then we'll start to see where the limiting beliefs are holding them back. So what makes great questions to ask to stimulate alternate perspectives? Well, there's so many different things that we can do here, but we can ask questions like, what's getting in the way of you making this change? We could ask questions like, what exactly do you believe about that? We can ask questions like, how does that look from your teammates' perspective? How does that look from our leadership's perspective? How does that look from the client's perspective? Can you see we're shifting perspectives by challenging the mindset with which they're approaching things? The one that always befuddles everybody that I talk about is the how question. No, not the how question. The how and the what question versus the why question. Now, we all know the importance of why. We need to know our why. We need to understand our purpose. We need to understand when something technical is going wrong. Why did it go wrong? And what is the root cause and how do we fix it? But you know what? When we are coaching our team members, let's avoid asking them the why question. So let me give you a very specific example. If we could say to them, why didn't you make this deadline? It could put them on the defensive. But if you say to them, what got in the way of you making this deadline? That could put them on the ownership path. And it could be followed up by a question, what are you going to do to make sure this never happens again? And that puts them on the ownership path again. You see, these kinds of questions, asking what and how questions instead of why questions, increases the sense of ownership, and it decreases the sense of being on the defensive. There is another reason to avoid the why question, and that is, we call it the therapy question. Now, some of you are maybe therapists, and I don't want to insult you by being too simplistic, but I do want to just say that very often what happens with the why questions, it puts people looking backwards instead of forwards. And we want our people to be moving forwards, to shifting behaviors. And so the why question can sometimes go, well, why didn't you do this? And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, the way that mom treated me, or the way I was potty trained, or whatever it might be. And it puts us more into this sort of psychological trauma space than the space of moving forward. And I really don't think us as leaders should be trying to be therapists. Hopefully you have a program where your people can go and get help where they need clinical help. And I'm a big fan of it, by the way. In fact, I'm dealing with one of my own traumas in life at the moment with a therapist, and it's incredible the progress I'm making. So I believe in that, but I don't think that we should be amateur therapists as leaders. What we do need to do is constantly increase the ownership in our people and move them forward. And we'll do that by asking what questions, not why questions. The final benefit of a what or a how question is this forward-looking nature of it. What can you do about that? How can that obstacle be overcome? Who could you involve to help you to move that forward? Who could you learn from? Who could you buddy with? You see, all of those questions help people to move forward. And our job as leaders is to get that forward momentum and to get that movement. And so you can now see how this chapter on stimulate builds on the chapter on connect. And that is where the dynamic starts to shift, where we start to see the autopilot shifting. And that's what we're looking for. So in summary, chapter 5 is called Stimulate, and it's about shifting perspectives, asking sometimes the difficult questions to increase ownership, or asking the challenging questions to increase direction and action plans. And sometimes asking a different kind of challenging question, which is, that might suit you, but how does it look to this person, to this person, to this person? And do those opinions matter? Let's build on our connection with our people by stimulating alternate perspectives. And we do it to ourselves too. The final part to the Morpheus Method is called Challenge, and this is chapter 6 in the book. So we go from connect to stimulate to challenge, and that is the Morpheus Method. And the Morpheus Method is designed to shift mindsets. So what do we do with challenge? Well, the first thing is sometimes we do nothing, and I'll tell you why. Because very often when we've really, really connected and listened, and we've really asked good questions and stimulate, the challenge, they already feel it and they're going to make the change themselves. Even with ourselves, when we really have connected with our mind versus our heart versus our gut versus our body versus our hips, and we've seen where the misalignment is, and we've stimulated by going, so how do I shift that? What do I do to shift the mindset or to shift the core belief, whatever it might be? That in itself is enough of a challenge already. But every now and then, we want to take that challenge a step further, and we want to speak our truths. And this starts with being able to be honest with ourselves. You see, sometimes we need an external perspective that isn't just coming through a question, it's actually by speaking a truth. You see, very often we're aware of something, and then we don't want to rock the boat, and we kind of a little bit sensitive, and we don't want to go to one of two extremes. And the one extreme is where, we hurt feelings and we do damage and this kind of thing. And the other extreme is we are so indirect that people don't get the message. And somewhere in the middle of that is candor with curiosity. And what we're really looking for is how can we be very direct and express ourselves whilst being open to other people being direct to us. You see, the curiosity piece is that I am going to tell you where I'm at and what I'm seeing, but I'm going to be open to what you're seeing. And if I'm not prepared to be open to what you're seeing, I shouldn't be telling. And this challenge is therefore a two-way challenge. It is when we are leading our people, it's our ability to challenge them with what we are seeing as our truth, and simultaneously to receive from them what they perceive as their truth. The internal version of this is challenging ourselves. Are we observing what's going on? And are we able to look in the mirror and say, I see the problem. And you know what? That is clearly based on a trauma or whatever. I need therapy. Or that is based on a mindset or a belief. I need to meditate on that, to figure out how to release it so that I can align this logic that I know is true and my gut that I know is true, but the belief that is misaligned. How do I sit with that? And that would be the self-challenge. Sometimes it's as simple as we realize that our body is rebelling. We're feeling an anxiety in the pit of our stomach. It's one of the ones I'm working through at the moment. Is I've discovered a new anxiety that's probably been there my whole life. In fact, I know it has, but I've only just discovered it right at the very, very bottom of my gut. Not my stomach, because stomach's much higher, but the gut right at the bottom. And what I've realized is that I sit with that and it starts to release, and it starts to play less and less of a role in influencing my behavior and shifting that, keeping me back on this autopilot that I don't want. And as it is heard and expressed, the autopilot starts to shift and the new behavior. And I'm already seeing the benefits of those new behaviors, and they feel like it's a permanent change. How does this work with our people? Well, sometimes we'll hear something from a person and immediately somewhere in us, we will know they're missing something, and that thing could be vital to them. And for that reason, we might need to speak our truth. Now, my personal belief is speak the truth in love. You see, for me, leadership is love. And to not speak the truth is, in fact, not love. It's niceness. And niceness, to me, is in some ways the opposite of love. We need to be able to tell our truth, especially if it's going to help them to grow, especially if it's going to liberate them from their limiting beliefs. And so we need to be courageous to look in the mirror for ourselves, and courageous to speak our truth to our people. That is the challenge. So as we wrap up the Morpheus Method, we find connect, stimulate, challenge. This is how we shift mindsets. This is how we shift limiting beliefs. This is how we bring our entire humanity into alignment for ourselves and into alignment for others. That is the challenge. Connect, stimulate, challenge. Chapter 6 in the book, part 2 in the book. So I want to just conclude with this. Many of you have struggled to create permanent change in your own life or in the lives of others. And I want to give you hope. There is a method for shifting our behavior. And what would it be like if the things that have been holding us back as leaders, we can be liberated from? What would it be like the things that are holding our people back, they could be liberated from? That is my challenge to you. As I'm connecting with you now, as I'm stimulating some other ways of thinking, I'm challenging you. Become the full leader you were meant to be, bringing your genius and your essence to the world, uninhibited by limiting beliefs and incorrect mindsets. That is leadership. That is influence. All great leadership is internal to external, self-leadership to leadership, self-influence to influencing others.